Dr. Brett Schoenfeld 是著名增肌专家，他除了拥有运动机能学博士学位以外，还曾经是自然健美冠军，也就是不依靠兴奋剂的增肌大师。在生化博士 Rhonda Patrick 的 Podcast 上，他分享了当今各类人群应该要摄取的最佳蛋白质量，相信内容无论对是否有在健身的人群都极有帮助。Real Life Kaizen 将为大家把英语圈的生活改善新知，定期以超浓缩加划重点的形式制作成影片，供各位朋友参考及分享。您的支持是我持续做这个节目的动力，喜欢的话请务必订阅、点赞、按小铃铛哦。
So the general literature shows somewhere around 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilogram per day of protein is required for resistance trained people, which is about double the RDA. So RDA for sedentary individuals is around 0.8 grams per kilograms per day. You need roughly double that to maintain or to promote anabolism while you're resistance training. In the upper confidence interval is about 2.2 grams per kilogram. For the vast majority of people, if you're in the Gen Pop, it's probably not going to make a difference. But if you're a bodybuilder, when I'm coaching bodybuilders and consulting with them, it really does not hurt to take in more protein. I mean, there's a lot of myths about kidney damage. In healthy individuals, no good evidence that there's any negative effects on renal function, certainly on bone density. These are all unsupported from my reading of the literature. So there's not necessarily a downside to it. You have to look at cost benefit. Everything is cost benefit. For bodybuilders, I would say go up to 2 grams per kilogram per day. It's not going to hurt. But I would say that becomes even more important to stay in that upper realm. So if you're like 1.6, if you're especially in a surplus, the needs for protein are going to be encompassed because the body isn't going to leach protein needs. When you start getting into a deficit, that's where I think it becomes even more important to be at that upper realm, that 2.0, 2.2 grams per kilogram.
So people that are, let's say people that are obese, if they are obese and or overweight, and they're wanting to lose fat mass, right? Should they be calculating their protein intake based on their targeted weight? Or because if they're 300 pounds, for example, or, that's a lot of protein, right?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and the answer is no. So the protein needs have been based on men and women who are relatively lean. I want to say relatively for the vast majority of the population, they would consider it lean. So for guys, somewhere like in the 12 to 15% body fat range. For women, around 20% body fat or so. So if you are 300 pounds and you should be 200 pounds. Let's say you would calculate it at your weight that you would be where you would be at your lean weight, where, for a guy, 12 to 15% body fat. So we can then regress to saying, base it on lean mass, but most people aren't getting DEXA scans to determine their lean mass. They're not going out and getting body fat caliper measurements, just not in the realm of what most people are going to do. These are not precise measurements. It's not like people think that we're doing these experiments and they really nail it down into these precise areas. They're generalized recommendations based upon what we know, and there's going to be variations around the mean. When we do research, we report the means, as you well know, which are the averages, but people aren't an average. So if you're overweight, obese, you want to figure your protein needs at what you would be at a relatively lean weight. I will say this, it doesn't hurt to take in a little extra protein. On the good side, protein is very difficult to store as body fat, much more difficult than carbohydrates and fat. If you're going to err on the side of caution, that's where you'd want to err on the side of taking in a little more protein at the expense, if your goal is weight loss, at the expense of carbs and fat.